Welcome to Advocacy Training, preparing for the 2022 legislative session. I'm Marie Sullivan. This video will cover Washington State PTA's legislative priorities with a look back at successes in the 2021 session and what's left to do in 2022. We also will briefly explain what to expect, including the players, the challenges, and what you can do to advocate for your PTA and your students. PTA puts making every child's potential a reality, starting with equity at the center of everything we do. Last year, we grouped priorities and positions together under four main buckets: equity, mental health and wellness, funding solutions, and safety. Each bucket has several positions. We use these statements to help guide our actions and responses to legislation being considered by the state legislature. Take a moment to review these statements. Last session was 100% virtual. Despite that uncommon approach, Washington State PTA scored many successes. For example, new school counselors in high-poverty schools, an emphasis on connectivity and devices to support remote and in-person learning, investments in seismic retrofits for at-risk schools, reducing lead in drinking water, and preserving federal funding for a focus on supporting all students in an in-person environment, just to name a few. But still to do in 2022? Addressing student mental and physical health is a top priority. Continue to focus on preventing gun violence and eliminating youth suicide. Adopting universal screening for highly capable students. Preserving funding already budgeted for the 2021-22 school year. Improving inclusionary practices and increasing funding to support students with disabilities and increasing resources for families to support those students successfully. Our work is never done, so it is important to keep parent voice in the mix. Your stories are compelling and can help shift legislative opinions. "2022 is the second year of a biennium. All even year sessions are only 60 days long. Odd years are 105 days long. That means the schedule for considering and acting on bills is compressed, and action will be fast. This year, session begins January 10th and ends March 10th. It's important to know that all bills introduced in the first year of the biennium, in this case in 2021, are eligible for action in 2022 if they haven't passed. And bills that passed one chamber last session can be scheduled for early action to improve their chances of passing this session. Legislators will also introduce new bills. And while the two-year spending plans were adopted last session, legislators will use the 2022 session to make adjustments based on new revenues, updated caseload forecasts, and current legislative priorities. The House and the Senate set their operational rules separately. This year they will have some things in common, but also plan to conduct business differently. Like in 2021, all committee meetings will be conducted virtually. That's good news, since testifying remotely is as easy as signing up and Zooming from your house or office. Unlike 2021, some legislators will be on the Capitol campus, although the House offices will be officially closed to meetings with the public. The Senate, however, is allowing up to 3 individuals to meet with a senator in their office, although whether to meet in person is up to the senator. Vaccination and testing will be required of legislators and legislative staff who are on campus. Like most years, we will have some new faces this session and a couple of shifts in committee leadership. Redistricting applies to the 2022 election, so it won't affect your current legislators. In the 2021 session, legislators adopted biennial budgets for operations, transportation, and construction. This session, they will make adjustments in what are called supplemental budgets. The governor is required to propose a balanced supplemental budget at least 20 days before the upcoming session begins. Here are a few priorities in K-12 for Governor Jay Inslee. You'll see alignment with some, and then a challenge with a large amount of funding, which we'll discuss later. At the top of the list, and strongly aligned with our priority, is $184 million to boost staffing ratios in all schools for nurses, social workers, counselors, and psychologists. The governor's budget is always a starting point. Legislators may accept some items and not others. Their budgets will likely be released towards the end of February and reconciled in March. Now let's take a look at some of the committees we monitor and where we provide testimony. The majority of K-12 policy runs through education committees in the House and Senate. These are the members of the House Education Committee. It is led by Sharon Tomiko Santos of Seattle, and the lead Republican is Alex Ibarra from Quincy. I haven't heard about any changes to membership yet, but there could be some. The Senate Early Learning and K-12 Education Committee combines both K-12 and early learning issues. The committee chair is Lisa Wellman of Mercer Island, and the committee has two vice chairs, Twyna Nobles of University Place and Claire Wilson of Federal Way. The lead Republican is Brad Hawkins of Wenatchee. We also pay close attention to our budget leaders, particularly those who have control and input in the operating and capital or construction budgets. As I mentioned before, the Senate and House will release their versions of supplemental operating, capital, and transportation budgets after the February revenue forecast, but it's likely we won't see a final budget until the last days of the March session. And because PTA issues are about the whole child and embrace family and community engagement, many committees will have policy or budget issues we watch during the session. Here are a few of those. Looking ahead to this session, perhaps the largest funding issue will be preserving dollars that were appropriated to school districts last session, but due to fewer students returning to in-person learning, enrollment has declined. Fewer students means less funding, because school funding is tied to a large degree to the number of students enrolled in public schools. The legislature and school districts estimated enrollment would bounce back last fall, but unfortunately enrollment is down by an average of 3.5%. The governor proposed recapturing funding previously earmarked for school districts this year and allocating it back out in the form of learning recovery. Unfortunately, districts have fixed costs, so taking away funds they expected and budgeted for, and then potentially sending them back out for learning recovery sounds great, but creates a mid-year cut. We would propose stabilizing enrollment funding back to pre-pandemic levels, understanding that the system will recover. And speaking of recovery, schools have their hands full this year with contact tracing, COVID protocols, and student mental health. The system is stretched thin due to shortages and, frankly, stress. This is a good year to take a pause on new policies and give the system a chance to recover. Legislators recognize the staffing shortages and will hopefully take steps to increase access to mental health services and professionals by increasing the ratios of staff needed to support student social and emotional health and well-being. There is a silver lining, too. The economy is rebounding, so additional revenues are expected to bolster the current biennium and the next biennium. This, coupled with the possibility of additional federal funds or federal funds that have yet to be allocated, creates an opportunity to stabilize and support the K-12 system. So, how should you get ready for session? Here's a list of 6 things you can do to prepare, including making sure you're familiar with Washington State PTA's positions and identifying issues that motivate you to get involved. At a minimum, stay informed by signing up for the weekly Focus on Advocacy newsletter, released each Monday during session. Feel like taking a more active role? Sign up for action alerts to message your legislators or try your voice at testifying. It's actually fun and will help. The Washington State PTA website is a treasure trove of information. Use the Advocacy page under Focus Areas as your launch point. There you'll find the current legislative priorities, one-pagers and videos describing the priorities, resolutions, a quick click to signing up for action alerts to participate in the process, and so much more. The Focus on Advocacy page is accessed through the Advocacy Focus area. It's your one-stop shop for all things advocacy, including links to a lot of resources and answers to your questions. Remember, your voice and engagement matters. Here's a quick reminder of the top 5 priorities adopted in fall 2020 and are also supported priorities. Again, you'll find detailed one-pagers and short videos describing all of these priorities. Use them to help you advocate for your students and your schools. Even though it will be virtual this year, PTAs can participate in Focus Day, a single day PTA members meet with their legislators and share common priorities. We encourage you to schedule appointments with your legislators or join a meeting for Focus Day on Monday, January 17th. In addition, we have given each day that week a big PTA topic and will be reminding legislators about the need to support bills that align with PTA priorities. Check the Focus on Advocacy page for more information. Still have questions about how to prepare for session? Join me for an interactive webinar on Tuesday, January 11th. Registration is required and can be found under the Events and Programs tab and looking at the January calendar for the 11th. Thank you for listening, and remember, there's no wrong way to PTA.